Hi, Commissioner. How are you?
Good, Senator.
Just want to ask you about the Climate Action Council. We obviously thought it was a priority enough to want to do it before the end of last session, and yet it has not taken shape. So can you tell us where we are, what the future holds, how soon they'll be meeting and getting their work done?
Sure. And we'll be making our appointments shortly on that. When the governor signed the law last year, we actually began working immediately. Both co-chair Alicia Barton and I assembled our teams and the 10 other agencies that are involved in the Climate Action Council to begin putting a framework in place as to meet the law. We know that once January 1st hit this year, that 2020 is going to be an extremely busy year on the Climate Action Council. We intend to have our first meeting as soon as possible after the final appointments have made. Probably meet on a regular basis throughout the course of this year. We have a very tight time frame to turn around a draft scoping plan and then obviously a final scoping plan in 2022. Our efforts last year, primarily through NYSERDA to do make an offshore wind commitment, solar across the state, and you see within this budget an extraordinary statement of the governor's intent to keep investing in projects, not to wait for necessarily the scoping plan, but to begin that work immediately. I, for one, am looking forward to this body convening. It's a fantastic body. The appointments have been very strong, and we'll be meeting and talking shortly.
Do you know when you'll have nominees?
Sorry?
Do you know when you'll have appointees? The governor's office will have appointees?
Very shortly.
With respect to the Bond Act, I think there's a lot of excitement behind that, but I think there's a lot of questions about what is in and what is not in. Can you give us some guidance on projects you think fall into it, what projects would fall out of it, and how we go about thinking throughout the budget process, how we tighten that up so voters have a good idea what their votes and what our state's money will be going toward?
Sure. The language that the governor used in the budget was broad, but we specified some categories of projects that we think would address the core need, right? The damage done from flooding, loss of habitat around the state, and the need to improve our state and prepare for the future. So things like tidal wetland restoration, increasing by thousands of acres, tidal wetlands along Long Island and New York City, freshwater wetlands upstate, in conjunction with the proposed freshwater wetlands law I know we'll talk about today. Reconnecting streams, right? So many streams around New York State that are horribly flooded are cut off because of either old dams or culverts. We'd like to remove as many of those as possible and restore thousands of miles of stream. Our fish hatcheries are in a state of, well, some of them are in relatively good shape, but some are not, and we need a long-term investment in our fish hatcheries. And those are the kinds of categories. Land acquisition, obviously putting a focus on land acquisition for the purpose of resiliency will be a core focus of this. And making sure that when we look at the Bond Act and what it can bring, what we're asking ultimately the voters to approve is integrating the Bond Act into all of our other programs. And that's a very important point because we have the $300 million EPF. We've got the Clean Water Infrastructure Act that we worked on together. We've got the Superfund law that we have. We have New York Works, DEC, and other agencies. So I think integrating all of those other programs into the Bond Act, and really around the Bond Act, makes for a very comprehensive approach.
Okay, and do you agree that in light of being on the front lines of climate change, storm surge, having issues with tidal wetlands, habitat restoration, et cetera, that Long Island itself should qualify for a number of projects coming out of the Bond Act to help it deal with the very problems it's meant to address?
Oh, no doubt about it, Senator. I mean, I joined right before Superstorm Sandy and saw the damage done down there, and now we've been rebuilding for the past 8 years there. The water quality conditions on Long Island, the loss of tidal habitat, the loss of some open space in certain areas. I mean, those are all the kinds of things that we would look to focus on, and certainly Long Island with the number of problems that it has environmentally and the population that is down there, we would be focusing significant attention down there.
Okay, I appreciate that. One of the things also mentioned in the language is a study about Nassau County studying the feasibility of having access to New York City water,
Right.
in light of emerging contaminants and other things. But many sleuths have searched for this study in the budget and have not found it. So I'm hoping you'll be able to tell us what funding might be available for the study, how long you think it should take, and what it involves, because there's a lot of interest on Long Island, but it's kind of hard to find details on it.
Right. So this is something that DEC and DOH will jointly work on. There is no specific appropriation in the budget for it, but we have the resources within our existing Clean Water Infrastructure Act and other pots that we would draw upon to conduct the study. I agree, it's an important study. At a bare minimum, looking at the possibility, the long-term possibility of tapping into the New York City system would provide great redundancy for Long Island, and also solving some issues with contamination in certain water districts. But that'll be a good study, and we'll get that going very quickly, understanding that it's a priority for Long Islanders.
Yeah, thank you. I hope we can get more clarity as the budget process develops over that. With respect to styrofoam and the polystyrene ban in the budget, there's also language in there that I had concern with that says we're going to ban this and future studies and bans depending on what DEC believes needs to be banned. Can you tell us what authority you're seeking in the budget and what that would mean? Would that mean that if that is granted, that anything DEC decides and studies is a product that is dangerous to New York, you could just ban it without legislative authority?
Well, as the polystyrene ban, we're looking at authority through the legislature to be able to to ban single-use polystyrenes, cups, plates, and so forth, as well as packaging materials. And seeking broader authority to be able to ban other items that may present a challenge for us from a landfill perspective, human health perspective, or pollution in the long term. Wouldn't be something that DEC would do without any kind of on its own administrative authority. We would look obviously through the regulatory process and make a very public process through any future items that we would look to get out of the waste stream. And I think in a way it's designed to accelerate our efforts to reduce the impacts of waste here in New York State and allow us to be a little bit more nimble how we approach things like plastic bag ban last year. This year it's polystyrene, but there may be other issues in the future where we need to move quickly and more effectively.
Okay. With respect to extended producer responsibility, I was personally happy to see the carpets and mattresses in here, but I do believe that in light of issues that we are having with glass, with our MRFs having financial strain, that we could do a lot more of a robust EPR effort like they're done in other countries and beginning in other parts of the state. So I'd like to get your thoughts on your willingness to do that or your openness to working with the legislature to establish a more robust form of extended producer responsibility.
Well, listen, thank you, Senator. And I think we're obviously more than willing to work with you on any ideas that you have. The idea of extended producer responsibility approaching waste streams like that is a really important one. We know that it works with carpets and mattresses, for example. California, Rhode Island, Connecticut do that very effectively, and they put the burden really back on the manufacturer as opposed to on the consumer, which has a very important function of incentivizing reduction of waste and using recycled materials. So if we can get that done this year and obviously get that massive amount of waste out of the waste stream, surprisingly, it's 1 million mattresses a year and like 120,000 pounds of carpet. I mean, that's going to our overly taxed landfills already. So any work we can do to reduce those streams and others, we would be appreciative of that authority.
Okay, I appreciate that. And with respect to some issues surrounding the bottle bill, do you agree with the statement that there's massive fraud surrounding the bottle bill that New York can do more to combat?
There's no question that there's fraud surrounding the bottle bill. We've got, I think, something upwards of 1,000 investigations over the last 5 years on bottle bill, 71 consent orders, $1.2 million in fines and penalties. So it is a significant issue. We have our environmental conservation police officers, both uniformed and undercover, on a number of investigations as we speak, and need to treat that significantly. That's money that should be going to New Yorkers and is not. Fraud is, I wouldn't characterize as rampant, but it's there, and we have to deal with it.
Okay. And lastly, last question surrounding the Adirondacks. Can you give us assurances that the stewardship money for rebuilding and reconstituting trails is going to be there at the end of the day to help help those repairs in light of the overuse as opposed to being swept up in the budget process into other areas?
Absolutely, one of my top priorities. I mean, you see the Adirondacks getting this incredible amount of use right now, and it's a good thing. I like to say publicly, it's a good thing for the Adirondacks to get that use, but we have to make sure that when people get there, it's safe for them, and the trails aren't being damaged. So, yes, that's the purpose of the increase in stewardship. I want to get sustainable trail crews out there. We think through this proposal, we have the opportunity to triple our effectiveness on trail building this coming year when you match up the new crews that we're proposing with the existing crews we have and some of the student crews that are out there. It's something we have to do. We've got to meet this challenge of increased use and make sure people have safe trips up in the woods, and they want to come back because the trails are in good shape, and it's a top priority of mine.
Thank you. I look forward to working with Chairman Engelbright and you during this budget process to get good things done for our state.
Thank you.